Welcome back to Snackcast.
How's it going?
So we normally would not dive from one book review right into another, but it was a few months ago I learned about this guy and this book, and it was under pre-order at the time. So I don't remember the exact date, but I think it was maybe mid-November this thing finally came out, and I was pretty excited about it. I shared it with Kevin, the premise of the book, and he was like, absolutely, let's get a couple copies as soon as they're available. So the book we're talking about is called Brain Energy. To read the cover to you, a revolutionary breakthrough in understanding mental health and improving treatment for anxiety, depression, OCD, PTSD, and more. Authored by Christopher M. Palmer, MD. Chris Palmer. So, to kind of, I guess, start it out, who's Chris Palmer, right? Well,
I'm asking you.
Yeah, well, his little leaflet over here. Chris Palmer, Harvard psychiatrist and researcher, director of the Department of Postgraduate and Continuing Education at McLean Hospital, and an assistant professor of psychiatry at Harvard Medical School. It kind of goes on to talk about, he still operates a traditional practice along with his work at Harvard and McLean Hospital. So by all intents and purposes, sounds like a pretty accomplished dude. I've never met him personally. I do follow him on Twitter.
Interesting takes on Twitter?
Oh, for sure. And a lot of it relates to this. He's a very interesting. We should probably put his Twitter handle up, I guess.
Maybe we'll do it next time.
But so Kevin and I we read the intro in chapter 1. We're diving into the book, and we wanted to bring a Snackcast book review.
Mental illness in this country is exploding. He gets right into that right in the gate. Said half of all people at some point in time in the United States will develop a mental disorder, whether that's anxiety or depression or OCD or ADHD. And then he just talks about how it's a growing epidemic. ADHD specifically in children, 41% increase between 2003 and 2012. And he starts talking about that. There's multiple camps of people and what they believe. Are we getting better at diagnosing? Are we pushing pharmaceuticals on people? So that's kind of where we're at with the book.
Yeah, it was really interesting, to your point. He said the first category relies on the belief that the statistics are wrong, right? And these people go, it's the pharmaceutical companies, and it's laziness. People today don't want to work at anything. It's this new generation of kids. And then the second category is the people that believe the numbers, right? And they go, oh, it's a good thing. We're getting a broader understanding. No, it's society. It's the introduction of technology and screens and being more isolated.
It's laziness. It's these kids these days,
Well, that's the other group. That's the group that don't believe the numbers.
Right.
And then the group that does believe the numbers, it's toxins, chemicals, fake foods, blah, blah, blah. So he goes on to say that all of this could be true, and it's all overlapping, right?
He mentions in here as well that even the diseases are overlapping, right?
Sure.
I mean, you have these. You break a leg, and you understand you got a broken leg. Nobody's arguing your broken leg. We know nothing about the brain. To the point, ADHD, how does it differ from ODD? How does it differ from autism? How does it differ? I mean, what is going on? Well, it seems like we just throw diagnosis out there, and there's just a tremendous amount of overlap.
Sure. And I would be in the camp that he points out in the book that I think in large part Big Pharma does play a role. We've been doing a lot of research lately, maybe more me than you, into some of the natural therapies that are basically banned in this country.
Or not pushed enough. I mean, things like meditation, things like
Sure.
getting out in nature. I mean, the interesting part is I think post-COVID we're starting to, he basically pointed out that since COVID, mental illness is up 40%, right? But I think that's starting to really start to change the narrative on healthcare, and I think that this is going to be one of those areas that ultimately benefits from. Everything shouldn't be a pharmaceutical. If you're not addressing your diet, you're not addressing your mental, I don't want to call it mental stability, but the things that you do for mental stability. You go out and play.
The great cholesterol myth closed with that, right? That it has to be well-rounded. You have to focus on, like you said, play, get in the dirt, go in the sun, have healthy relationships. If your relationships are not healthy, work to improve them.
And I don't know if it was here or it wasn't here. It was actually, was listening to a podcast from Dr. Ken Berry yesterday. And on that podcast, he mentions, all of the things that are at play with doctors. American consumer is very much in the belief that when I walk into your office and I pay you, that you're going to have an immediate response to me. That I want you to solve my problem for me. Right. So that doctors. Really, the only tool in their arsenal, when you think about it, what's other tools that doctors have in the arsenal? Well, I think they got more, but a lot of them only believe that their prescription pad is the only tool they got.
Yeah, certainly first option in a lot of cases.
So this is not a small scenario by any stretch. They talked about the price we pay. They said by 2030, mental health will be a $6 trillion business.
Yeah, and I know it comes from the same sentence. I actually highlighted the same, but that's up from $2.5 trillion in 2010. So that's almost a threefold increase.
Almost a threefold,
in
right?
20 years.
And then he says, while the financial cost is huge, the mental cost to families and to relationships is even worse. I mean, mental illness destroys lives, and everything from depression to anxiety to ADHD. I mean, suicide. I mean, it's unbelievable.
It's kind of can I say it's been depressing to read the intro into this book? Because I don't focus a lot of my attention on mental illness, but kind of learning what people really do deal with. And, one of the things that struck me, he said some people, they don't think of their symptoms as symptoms. They think their suffering is just a natural part of existence. And I'm like, God, man, that hurts.
Right. This is what I've come. This is what has to happen to me.
Yeah.
I have to accept that I'm just ADHD, or I'm just ODD, or I'm just OCD, or I'm just depressed. That's right. That's just.
I guess you bring up a great point there, or at least you did in my mind, that this book it crosses all kinds of mental disorders, autism, PTSD, OCD, ADHD. I don't even know them all, but it's not. I think my brain tends to want to speak to depression because it's, I guess, probably the more prevalent one. That I don't have statistics to say that if you were to rank the number of people that depression is number one, I'm guessing it is.
Yeah, I would. There's a tremendous amount of anxiety and depression probably hand in hand.
Yeah.
We've become a society that you got to take a Xanax before you can go out into public.
Yeah.
I mean, so he's painting a really interesting picture, right? And then he starts to wrap up in the end of this chapter with what's kind of being done. And one of the quotes that I had was Dr. Tom Insel, the former director of the National Institute of Mental Health had to say in 2017 after leaving the National Institute of Mental Health. He said, "I spent 13 years at the NIMH really pushing the neuroscience and genetics of mental disorders. And when I look back on that, I realize, well, I think I succeeded at getting a lot of really cool papers published by cool scientists at fairly large costs, I think 20 billion. I don't think we moved the needle in reducing suicide, reducing hospitalizations, improving recovery for tens of millions of people who have mental illness." And, you know, welcome to the world of medicine in America, right? Richest nation in the world, and we spend trillions and trillions of dollars, and we don't move the needle at all.
Don't move the needle.
So why should mental health be any
part of
different?
the case he's making, right, is he actually references a study where they followed, I don't remember how many, 400 people, I think it was, and they only saw long-term improvement, long story short, in 10% of those people. He said, you know, he's basically making the case. He said a lot of people wouldn't want this said out loud because it may convince someone not to seek treatment. And he's adamant that if you're dealing with something, seek treatment. Go get some help. But the fact of the matter is that a lot of times the help people are getting isn't moving the needle, to use your phrase. He, and he said that can often lead to, if people are told that our treatments work, and then those people don't get better, some will blame the treatment or the professionals, but others will blame themselves. That's a dark hole. That
is a dark hole as well. Yeah, and again, I think it goes back to your comment earlier, is that's just me, and I just got to deal with this.
Right.
You know.
So I'm really excited to dig into this book. It's definitely an area of interest or subject matter I don't have any expertise in.
And I hope that, you know, by what we're doing and books like this and everything else, that it's not, you know, it's not the black sheep of the family anymore. I mean, this is, mental illness used to be, I mean, when you're talking about half of Americans will develop a mental illness at some point in their lives. Right. I mean, look over at your neighbor, you know. Yeah, he's posted on social media and he looks like he's got the world together.
It's Jerry. Jerry's the 50% in the room.
But, you know, the reality is that most families don't have it all together, and right. they're breaking apart behind the scenes. But that's not the image we're supposed to display.
Yeah. His closing mini paragraph of chapter 1 is, the fact is, in order to make real progress, we have to be able to answer the question, what causes mental illness? And up until now, we have failed.
That's a good segue into chapter 2.
Yeah.
It's a good segue.
So we'll cover chapter 2 in the next episode. And look forward to digging into Mr. Palmer, Dr. Palmer's book.
Dr. Palmer. Doctor.
All right. Thanks for tuning in. Questions, comments, concerns, hit us at snackcast@yes.fit.
Stay moving.
See ya.